I'm Matt D from Dying Sun. As you probably know, Anthony, Damon, and Scott are all from Misery. So I've got one of the best backing bands in the world. That sounds like I'm taking way too much credit there. Yeah, so we've just released our new album, our second album. This one's called Black Coven.
Yeah,
It's got a pretty cool artwork by Tony Champ on the front.
beautiful, Matt. Thanks for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Man. So, as you mentioned, Dying Sun recently released your second album, Black Coven. So, how's the early reception been for it?
Yeah, pretty good. So yeah, we've got lots of good feedback so far. It's pretty early days, but pretty happy with the feedback. Got some really good feedback from a couple of peeps about the sound on the album, so happy with that. That's for sure.
Cool. So, tell us a bit more about the album from a musical point of view and what you're going for with it.
Yeah, so we didn't have any kind of big plans for it, apart from we wanted it to be better than the first album, of course. I guess probably every band says that one. We also just wanted it to sound a bit more cohesive, so particularly kind of moving between the songs, the dynamic of the album. We feel like we've got a pretty good kind of dynamic range happening there amongst the songs, as well as the different topics, different sounds.
So you mentioned your first album, which was your debut, Doomsday Comers. So how does this one differ musically from that?
Look, it's not greatly different. It's probably just a step up in quality and songwriting.
And you mentioned the artwork on this album, mate, which is pretty cool. So can you run us through that?
Yeah. So Tony Champ did the artwork. Damon, who's probably the main guy in our band, the main writer, approached Tony. They've been working together for 30 years now. They've done together quite a few misery covers. And so he just hit Tony up and gave him some ideas from a couple of songs, particularly Black Coven and Return to Madness. And that's what Tony put together. He put it together really quickly too.
Yeah, right, cool. So there's going to be some people out there who haven't heard of Dying Sun before, mate. So tell us a bit more about the band.
Yeah. So I guess we're a doom metal band. I wouldn't call us purely doom. There's a little bit of rock in there, a little bit of metal. We probably sound a little bit old school. Damon is the main guy behind most of the writing, so he's the singer and bass player from Misery, and he approached me in around about 2019 to just re-record some 3 early songs that he had from a previous band called Cardinal Sin, and we started work on those, and we kind of started to build from there, and after a short period of time had 12 songs, and so I hit him up and said, sounds like we're about to record an album here, Damon. He said, yep, let's do it.
Yeah, very cool. And as you mentioned, mate, like your members have all been in bands like Misery, there's Laceration Mantra and Motorized. So will fans of those bands like Dying Sun necessarily?
Oh, I think so. I think what they'll hear is the quality on the album. Whether they like the genres, something different. Obviously, it's not like Misery or Laceration Mantra. But you'll hear, what those guys bring from those bands into this. In particular, if you're a fan of Anthony's lazy snare, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I love a lazy snare. I don't like anything that's kind of too, clicky on time.
Yep.
That is definitely present there. So that gives a bit of a groove behind what we're doing.
And you mentioned that what those guys have brought from those other bands into Dying Sun. So what are those aspects?
Yeah, well, I guess Damon writes quite a fair bit for Misery, and he also brings the anger in the lyrics. So those parts there. He's also a really driven guy. So I like working with him because we get stuck into it and smash things out. Hence our second album out 2 years after the first one. We would have been out earlier actually, but there was a bit of delay for various things. So it's basically been mastered since the start of July. Anthony brings, I guess, what he brings to Misery and Motorized on drums. And Scotty brings along the solos.
So the album Black Coven has been released so far on Bandcamp, but it won't be released on Spotify and Apple and other platforms until January. So why the delay?
Kris, I'm sure you can appreciate these things cost quite a fair bit of money to kind of get happening. And before start to kind of go into the streaming platforms where essentially we don't draw any money for, the next release from, we thought we would put it up onto Bandcamp and sell it by CD first. Hopefully that might encourage people to support the band. I'm sure the peeps out there know that, the income that comes from Spotify, you can have 1,000 plays and it's still not the equivalent of someone purchasing, the download from Bandcamp or the physical component from on the CD.
Yeah, fair call. And you mentioned before that your sound is like a mixture of hard rock, doom, and metal. So in the writing process, mate, like how do you find the balance of each? Like how do you know when you've gone too far with one style and not far enough with another?
Yeah, that's a good question. We probably don't think about it that hard. Essentially, we kind of bring songs to the jam room and we try to then put our own kind of colours on top of it from there. So like I was saying, Damon's the predominant songwriter, and he'll bring in riffs. We'll work those through. He's often also got lyrics, and then my job is really to start putting together, how I'm going to present that from my perspective, the vocal perspective, and the harmonies, and sometimes that might also be melodies because he may have come in with a death metal kind of vocal to help show me where the lyrics are kind of placed. So I think when Damon brings something in, that little bit of element that we all contribute starts to kind of pull things together so you get that kind of more cohesive sound across the album.
Fair enough. And you recently did a couple of shows with PistonFist and Lucifungus, mate. So how did they go? So
Kris, we did 3 shows in a row. They're our first 3 shows ever.
Yeah.
And for me, man, they were my first shows in 18 years.
Oh, cheers.
And so, we banged them out. So it was Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, Gold Coast. Look, they were really good. It was really awesome to play with those bands. I've known lots of those blokes for kind of probably about 30 years. So it was nice to be all together in a room and banging stuff out. Never played any of those places before because they didn't exist the last time that I got on the. It was awesome. There's lots of buying of each other's merch. We had friends and family attend, so it was a really good vibe.
Yeah, sweet. And what about 2023 and beyond, mate? You got more shows planned?
Look, not at the moment. We probably need to sort something out. We've got, as you know, Scotty and Ant are in Laceration Mantra and Motorized. And then you've got those 2 blokes plus Damon doing the Misery 30th anniversary shows for their first album, and Necessary Evil. So it's really about how we can kind of fit Dying Sun in there and get some live shows happening. So I don't have an answer to that. Sorry.
No worries, mate. Well, thanks very much for your time today, mate. The album Black Coven is out now on Bandcamp, so get in there and support the band and buy some copies, and hopefully we see you on the road next year, brother.
Excellent. Thanks for the plug and the interview, Kris. Really appreciate it.